Thank you everyone for joining tonight, the Route 128 I-95 Land Use and Transportation Study. Tonight is the third and final public meeting that we are going to have for this project, but as we'll talk about during the presentation, this is certainly not your last time to give feedback and review materials. We've got quite a lot of information to share, so we'll just get started. As a way of introductions, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Liz Williams. I'm the Director of Data and Policy in the Office of Transportation Planning at MassDOT, joined by a project team, a very skilled and talented project team, as I'm sure a lot of you know, who will also introduce themselves on this project as they start making presentations. I'm also joined by Hong Pham of MassDOT, who's our VPI producer tonight, and he's going to go through some Zoom controls and some initial slides to get us oriented. Hong?
Yep, thank you, Liz. Was looking for the mute button. So my name is Hong Pham again. I'm one of two MassDOT producers this evening, providing tech support and facilitating questions. My co-producer is Michaela Niles, who you'll be hearing from later on. So I'm pretty sure we are all familiar with the Zoom format and have done a lot of virtual involvement meeting for a while now. However, just as a reminder, we ask that you keep your microphone muted, but please feel free to use the Q&A box if you have any questions during the presentation. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the workshop presentation, and there you can verbally ask your question by raising your hands, and we can ask you to unmute yourself. On the screen here, you see that you can toggle the mute microphone off and on by Alt-A, or turning on your video by Alt-V. And if you're having difficulties accessing or hearing us during this whole presentation, you can dial into the meeting at 309-205-3325 with the webinar ID 890-6390-0416. And if you're having Zoom technical issues altogether, please dial 888-799-9666. Next slide here. This virtual public meeting will be recorded. MassDOT may choose to retain and distribute the video, image, audio, and or chat transcript. All part of this meeting is considered a public record. And your continued audience to this virtual public meeting is you basically providing your consent to participate in being recorded within the event. If you're not comfortable being recorded, please turn off your mic and camera, and you may also choose to excuse yourself altogether from the meeting. Once again, please, we would ask that you keep your microphone muted during the presentation, and you can raise your hand and we can ask you to unmute. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. We also did put up a survey, so your feedback is very important to us. So please participate in that survey at the end of the presentation when you turn off, exit from Zoom. This is a slide about silver diversity. If you would like to learn more about MassDOT policies and diversity and civil rights, please visit our website, www.mass.gov/non-discrimination-in-transportation-program, or you can reach out to our Office of Diversity and Civil Rights. So with that, I'll turn it over to Liz, and thank you for joining our meeting.
Thanks, Hong. So as usual, we have a lot of information to share with you, but we also want to take the opportunity to collect even more feedback from you all than we have in the past and hear directly from you as we are nearing the 30-day public review period for the entire report and subsequently the conclusion of this project. So tonight we're going to start with a 40 to 45 minute presentation, followed by a 30 to 40 minute breakout session in rooms that we have already assigned you to. During these breakout rooms, you're going to hear from a project team member about the alternatives that we're considering to advance the specific goals that we've gathered input from during the past 2 public meetings and during the course of the project. Following the breakout rooms, we'll briefly spend 10 minutes reporting out from these smaller group sessions before closing out our formal presentation by reviewing next steps. After our formal presentation has concluded, we have set aside time at the end for more general Q&A. So hopefully you're all familiar by now with the purpose of our study and our study area, but for those of you that are just joining us, our project is meant to establish future land use, housing, and economic development assumptions. Our project kicked off in August of 2021, and we've got a specific focus on that segment of Route 128 or I-95 that runs between Route 16 and Route 2. Between Newton and Lexington. As I like to say, it captures both of the McDonald's service plazas on I-95. So those are good sort of bookends for the study. Our study area also captures that sort of bump out. You can see it in sort of the upper left-hand corner of the map here. That's that Winter Street neighborhood, giving the extent of the development activity that's happening. Next slide. So as I said, we kicked this project off well over a year ago. And as you all know, we've certainly accomplished quite a lot in that time. At this meeting, we're going to review the work that's been done under tasks 5 and 6, including the alternatives analysis, where we take a deeper dive in evaluating and understanding the impacts of those alternatives that had been advanced from task 4, the alternatives development task. We're also going to be talking about task 6, which is the recommendation and implementation plan. So this meeting is really to dig on the final elements of our study process, which is those alternatives we'd like to move forward and advance as recommendations for implementation. What I really want to be clear about, though, is that this is a planning study. It's not a design study or an environmental review study. A planning study is conceptual in nature and happens well before any money has been dedicated or any of these ideas or design or implementation work has begun. So we put this infographic together to explain how this study fits into potential changes or enhancements to the corridor. In the overall project development process, step 1 really is this planning study, where we review existing and expected future transportation issues. After we finish this planning study, we'll hand it off to the Highway Division, the MBTA, Rail and Transit, and other stakeholders and facility owners. Once the alternatives and recommendations are vetted, reviewed, and accepted, we put the planning study through the permitting process in an environmental study. Once a project has been completed in preliminary design, the project promoters need to identify funding for the project. Project promoters include towns, MassDOT, the MBTA, or the RTA. With funding in place, the next phase of project development is the final design. During this phase, we determine the final layout of the project and design details. And finally, in the last phase, we advertise for bidding and award a contract. We then make improvements under the supervision of the responsible MassDOT division. This entire process takes many years and many stakeholders. There are required public review and comment processes associated with all of these steps and phases. So again, this slide is just to lay out sort of where this study falls in an overall sort of project development process, was just say at the very, very, very beginning. Next slide. That being said, before we dive into the alternatives development and analysis, I want to take a quick second to review what we heard in the last public meeting. So our last meeting was in July, and it was, again, well attended for a midsummer meeting. This time we reviewed the issues, opportunities, and constraints and introduced the alternatives development task that evaluated a large catalog of improvements and upgrades. We asked attendees 3 poll questions. The first about the vision of the future of the corridor. The second asked people to rank study area goals. And the third, the third asked about the significance of various modal investments. We were able to have, a really good conversation with folks during the Q&A. That did inform our analysis, and I expect that we'll have the same level of enthusiasm and input tonight. So thanks again for joining. At this time, I'm going to hand things over to Nikki, who will get started talking about the details of the alternatives development and analysis task.
Thank you, Liz. Hi, everyone. My name is Nikki Hastings. I'm the project manager on the consultant team side from VHB. I'm joined by a number of my colleagues on the VHB team who will be facilitating the breakout rooms later this evening, and they'll introduce themselves in those rooms. So I'd like to spend some time talking through the alternatives development and analysis process that we've been through. The first step is really to develop a long list of ideas that were informed by the working group and the last public meeting that we had with all of you. And those alternatives are aimed at fulfilling the study goals and alleviating identified transportation deficiencies. They included a long list of both policy and infrastructure improvements, and they considered previous or ongoing studies that are done throughout the corridor. So really building upon improvements that are already planned. The study team then conducted a first level screening or fatal flaw review to identify a targeted subset of alternatives that were then advanced to detailed analysis against the study goals and objectives. And ultimately, this process culminates in an action plan for the Route 128 I-95 corridor. Now, to start the process, the study team considered not only the existing and future conditions analysis, but also input from the working group, discussions with MassDOT and the MBTA, and the public outreach process. We also leveraged input that you all had on the online mapping tool that lived on our virtual meeting room website. So really taking all feedback and developing that long list of alternatives was where we started from. Now, the image shown on this slide is an example of an alternatives development board that was used during a working group meeting to help solicit and document ideas. Alternatives were categorized into the categories shown here on the screen. There were over 100 ideas generated during that development process that were then whittled down into about 80 alternatives. These buckets we show are land use, economic development, a series of transportation alternatives that include all of the different modes, and environmental alternatives. Now, the codes that are shown in parentheses next to these categories are what we use throughout the study to denote which alternative category each falls into, and you'll see them carried throughout. The next step was to really take those 80 alternatives and do a first level screening on them based on the established goals and objectives of the study. Where applicable, the study team considered a high-level assessment of feasibility based on the physical constraints of the area. And really the goal, the goal of this exercise was to identify and weed out those alternatives that would have significant impacts or barriers prior to the more detailed analysis. Based on this first level screening process, the study team advanced 54 alternatives for further study. We discarded 19 alternatives, and we recommend 11 for immediate action. Those set of immediate actions are shown here on the screen. And really what they are shorter term recommendations that seek to address existing safety or operational deficiencies, or in some cases, advance aspects of longer term improvement projects. And for the most part, these improvements can be completed within a year and include low-cost options that do not require environmental permitting or prolonged design or approvals or extensive community vetting. So the next step to advance these immediate term recommendations includes coordination with the responsible parties listed here on this slide and evaluating how these might be able to be addressed in a timely manner. Now, moving on to the alternatives that were advanced beyond that first level screening for detailed analysis, the study team evaluated each of the alternatives against a consistent set of evaluation criteria that are tied to each of the 5 study goals. A screenshot of the goals, objectives, and evaluation criteria document is shown here on the screen. And you can access it through the study website at any time by scanning the QR code that's shown here on the screen, or by accessing it through MassDOT's website for the project. And when you enter that virtual meeting room, you'll see a blue banner on the left side with an icon labeled goals and objectives. You can click on that and you'll get access to this evaluation criteria for your review. Now, as I mentioned, evaluation criteria respond to the 5 study goals, which are listed here on the screen. And we use those goals and the input that we received through the working group and through previous public informational meetings to understand the priority for investments along the corridor. As you can see, improving safety, access, and mobility for all was weighted highest among project stakeholders. And we use this weighting to inform essentially how well each of the alternatives addresses the project goals, and then used this weighting to index them. So alternatives were rated against the evaluation criteria and then weighted based on the study goals to calculate a maximum value or a maximum score, and then used for comparison purposes among alternatives. The study team further organized alternatives around 5 fundamental themes that generally align with the goals and are shown on this slide. The first is improve regional mobility, then expand transportation choice, align policies with mobility goals, plan for the future, and address congestion and improve safety. We'll spend some time talking about each theme and the types of alternatives that are included in them. And later in the meeting, we will use breakout rooms to dive into each theme and the alternatives that are included in them. And I'll talk about those breakout rooms a little bit later. So the first theme that study alternatives are organized around is improve regional mobility. And for each theme slide, you'll see the title on the top, then the context of the theme below that. And then the alternatives are shown on the left in bulleted form. They're organized from best to worst performing based on that scoring criteria I discussed earlier. And then we show either a map with the location of the alternatives or other relevant information on the theme on the right. So I just want to orient you a little bit to the slides that you're seeing as we move through the alternative themes. So the first is improve regional mobility. Now, providing more reliable and robust multimodal access between the region and the Route 128 study area are really critical components to accommodating all of the land use growth that's projected along this corridor and protecting neighborhoods adjacent to the corridor from cut-through traffic. Alternatives in this theme are multimodal, and they acknowledge that we can't build our way out of vehicular congestion, but we must focus on expanding options for travelers. Alternatives in this subset scored the highest of across all of our themes. And many of these options not only achieve mobility goals, but also contribute to other goals of supporting strategic land use, advancing social equity, and contributing to environmental and health benefits. So this will be one of the breakout rooms that will dive into more detail on the alternatives shown on the screen. The second theme is expanding transportation choice. As shown in the poll results on the right of this slide, we heard from you at the last public informational meeting that prioritizing non-auto investment is really critical for this corridor. So what alternatives in this theme seek to do is expand and diversify those multimodal options, both for connections from, to, and within the study area. Currently, the study area is really hampered by a lack of multimodal connections, and it limits the potential for mode shifts for all trip types to more sustainable modes like transit, bicycling, and walking. So this alternative actually includes a number of alternatives that focus on active transportation and transit. As you can see, we considered a lot of alternatives throughout the study area in this category. And as the map on the right of the screen shows, the improvements span the entire study area north to south on both sides of the interstate. The next theme of alternatives is aligning policies with mobility goals. What we've seen throughout this study is really a connection between land use and transportation demands. And changes to existing policies could better align with larger mobility goals and infrastructure investments that are contemplated under the other alternatives. The policies shown on this slide seek to diversify land uses, improve transportation choice, enhance access to jobs, open space, and other destinations, and promote positive effects on the surrounding community. It's important to note that implementation of such policies would require collaboration among state, regional, and municipal partners. The next study theme is Plan for the Future. This alternative package really includes future-focused alternatives for the study area that seek to leverage existing or emerging technologies, support renewable energy, and address sustainability and resiliency challenges. Now, in many cases, alternatives in this theme would not be implemented in a vacuum, but are really a larger part of MassDOT or statewide initiatives. So we'll dive into these in the breakout room as well. And lastly, the fifth category is address congestion and improve safety. There are a number of alternatives in this category that span 2 slides. And what they do is really acknowledge that while we can't build our way out of congestion, there is a need to support vehicular traffic, including not only personal vehicles, but freight, service, and delivery within and throughout the study area. And alternatives in this theme include a series of physical infrastructure investments that really address that local congestion, reliability, and safety issues that were identified as part of earlier stages of the study. Where possible, these physical improvements do incorporate enhancement or expansion of pedestrian and bicycle accommodations where it's appropriate. Now, as I mentioned, there are a significant number of alternatives in this section as well, and they really do span from north to south throughout the study area and range from local intersection enhancements, reconfiguration of ramps, and even improvements along the main line of 128 itself. Now, before we dive into the breakout rooms, we did want to give you a framework for the next steps of this study, in which we'll be developing and finalizing the study recommendations. When we go into the breakout rooms, the study team will present the draft recommendations that are really based on our analysis to date and conversations with stakeholders. But it's also an opportunity for continued refinement of these recommendations based on the discussions we have tonight and beyond. The study team will take into account the feedback that we hear and develop an implementation plan. An example is shown on this slide. I know it's tough to read, but we'll go through the elements so you understand what it includes. So the draft recommendations for each alternative are based on the analysis, as I mentioned, and the recommendation is either to advance or discard that alternative. It's based on discussions with stakeholders, but will continue to be refined. The implementation plan will categorize alternatives into the different time horizons shown here. So there'll be a bucket of short-term or 0 to 5 year alternatives that really have minimal or little permitting that's required. They're relatively low cost and uncomplicated designs, something that can progress rather quickly. Medium-term alternatives may require some permitting and generally are higher cost and more intensive design. And those longer-term alternatives, 10 years and beyond, require moderate to extensive permitting and are higher cost and a substantial design process. So those are parts of the implementation plan. Additionally, the plan will include order of magnitude cost estimates and identify lead agencies and facilitating organizations or other partners that can help to advance recommendations from this study towards implementation. And now we will dive into the breakout rooms. So just to get them set up, so you all have some context, the objectives of the breakout rooms are really to dive into those details of the study alternatives. As I mentioned, there were 54 that were advanced from the first level screening. So it's quite a bit and too many, unfortunately, to focus on in the large room. But we'll use those breakout rooms to have that conversation. And we'll collect feedback from you to help us inform the recommendations. There will be 4 rooms tonight that are shown here on the screen, with 2 of the study themes combined based on your feedback when you registered for the meeting of what you're most interested in hearing about. In each of the 5 rooms, the study team will present alternatives in each theme and have a discussion with you about those draft recommendations, and take notes to help inform the next steps of our study. Now, logistically, you will all be sent to breakout rooms based on your registration poll question. So when you registered for the meeting, you indicated which of these 5 study themes you were most interested in hearing about. You also indicated geographically where your interest lies, and we'll take that into account as we present information in the breakout rooms. We'll spend about 30 to 40 minutes in those rooms. And the study team will be monitoring kind of progress of conversations, and then we'll bring everyone back to the main room to conclude the presentation, as Liz mentioned. Now, at any point, you may choose to switch out of your designated breakout room and join another room. And you can do that by clicking leave and leave breakout room, but just make sure you don't leave the meeting. Now, before we send you all off, it is important to note that, as Liz mentioned, this is not your only opportunity to provide comment on the alternatives and recommendations. If we don't get through all of the alternatives within the breakout room time as allowed, please be aware that materials will be made available on the project website after the meeting for viewing and review. And a draft report will be available for public comment this spring, which includes all of our work on the study. At this time, I think we can move to the breakout rooms.
Was there a way to join a different breakout room? I'm not, I'd like to go into room 2.
The expand transportation choice room.
Yeah,
Okay, hold on one moment. I'll see if I can assign you to that room.
thank you very much.
I was thinking of leaving room expand transportation choice and going to the policies.
Okay, hold on one moment. I'll see if I can move you to that room. Hi, Jeff. I see you have a raised hand.
Yeah, I was just wondering if I could move to room 2 as well.
Yes, hold on one moment.
Hey, Michaela, is there anything I can be helpful with?
No, I think we're all set for now. Thanks, Liz.
Great. Well, if any of the other I see there's some other folks just kind of hanging out in this main room, which is totally fine. If anybody has any questions or needs help getting into any of the rooms, just let us know.
Hi, Patrick. I see a raised hand from you. Hello, Counselor Katz. I see a raised hand from you.
Yeah, I thought there was an option to join other breakout rooms, but it seems when I click on the breakout rooms, I can only go back to joining the one I was assigned to.
Please let me know which room you'd like to move to, and I can move you there.
I think it was improve regional mobility.
Sounds good. I'll move you in one moment.
If I'm wrong, I'll come back. Thank you.
Can you move me into room 1?
Most definitely.
Thanks.
Good evening to everyone here in the main room. If you'd like to be moved to one of the breakout rooms, please let me know and I can move you to that room. Again, good evening, everyone. If you'd like to move to another breakout room, please let me know and I can move you to that room. Hello, Counselor Katz.
Yeah, me again. Could I be put into room number 2, please?
Of course.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello to everyone in the main room. We'll have the breakout rooms open for about another 20 minutes or so. Please let me know if you'd like to move to another breakout room and I can move you to that room. Good evening to everyone here in the main room. We have about 10 minutes left in the breakout rooms. If you would like to be placed into a different breakout room, please let us know and we can assign you to that room.
Hi, everyone. I hope you had lively discussions in your breakout rooms. Are we ready to move on to the report outs, Liz?
Sorry, Nikki. Thank you. I just had a really hard time unmuting. Yes, I think we are ready to move into the breakout. So maybe we can ask the moderators from each room to report back on sort of what we heard from folks. So Nikki, I believe you were in the first room, improving
That's
regional
me.
mobility.
Yes, that's me. I was in that first room. We got through many of our alternatives, not all, so because we did have a lively discussion. We heard some comments about really connecting the corridor to the region and considering east-west movement, north-south movement, how land uses and zoning can support transportation and vice versa. We had a discussion about how transportation options and especially transit and bicycle need to be further expanded to support mobility throughout the corridor. And not just limiting when we think about bicycles or active transportation modes, not just thinking about bicycles, but all micromobility options. We also talked a little bit about, like I mentioned, that east-west connectivity, particularly from Lexington to Alewife on the northern portion of the study area, and how that was viewed as important. So I think those are some key takeaways from room number one.
Great, thank you. I believe we had Michael and Matthew in room number 2, expand transportation choice.
Yes, sure. I'll go ahead and get started. So I'll talk about the transit ones, and Matt, if you want to talk about the active transportation. Thank you everyone for the fantastic feedback. We heard a really strong interest in seeing additional transit service in the area as a potential option for a lot of residents of the area, as well as commuters to the area. We are very fortunately joined by Susan Barrett from the town of Lexington, as well as Jeff Bennett from the 128 Business Council, who chimed in on the potential need for different services, as well as the potential to monitor and continue looking at different services in the area. So generally speaking, thinking about the connection between Lexington and Waltham, there was some pretty strong support for that. But also interest in seeing a fully accessible Auburndale station as a critical component of thinking about any additional transit service leaving out of that station as far as shuttles or buses go. So Matt?
Yeah, and so just a little bit about the active transportation, so the bicycle and pedestrian side of things. We heard a lot about the importance of kind of that last mile connection, kind of making sure there's bicycle and pedestrian options to kind of connect like to different transit stations. We also heard a lot about kind of like filling in the gap in different bicycle and pedestrian networks. So making sure we don't like just build a facility in a vacuum and that it connects to other options, and kind of making sure that bicycle facilities that are designed that are safe, have that be like shared use paths or separated bike lanes that are away from vehicular traffic, to try and make sure that we have like the safest options available for all.
Great, thank you. We had Donnie in room number 3.
Yes, Donnie here. We made it through all of our alternatives and the recommendations. I thank everybody for listening to my explanations. We did have a couple of comments come in, for one on the infrastructure bill and related to the autonomous and connected vehicle alternative. The infrastructure bill does hasten beacons for bicyclists and pedestrians, enabling detection by connected cars. And that was one of the considerations that was proposed for MassDOT in implementing that particular alternative, and cautioning, does that really improve safety? There was also a comment on generally about workforce housing and affordable housing and residential development, thinking about ADUs and making sure that they're supporting this particular pursuit of additional housing. And some communities like Lexington already allow ADUs, but they're not used as much. I think there was a quote of, it's easier to cut down a tree than it is to put up an ADU. So thinking about zoning and thinking about the permitting process around ADUs to make it to advance that particular housing type. And then lastly, just thinking about the equity burden between different communities. So we had a lot of policies, and we have a lot of policies that are being put forth as recommendations. How do these policies get implemented across different municipalities, and where do some of these alternatives, like the workforce housing and the affordable housing, where do they go, and where is this quote unquote burden, such as 40B developments? How does that get distributed equally across across the study area?
Great, thank you, Donnie. And then finally, we had Kathleen in room number 4, address congestion and improve safety.
Sorry, I was on mute. We also had a lively discussion with a lot of folks in the room from the Waltham and Newton areas, but very familiar with the corridor as having traveled along it. So some of the highlights were, obviously addressing congestion and safety in, critical areas that folks, were particularly aware of, but also, providing comment and noting that any improvement needs to be coupled with appropriate wayfinding signage and traffic control to make sure that users of the roadways know how to get appropriately from point A to point B and help reduce confusion and ultimately congestion out there. We did also have some, comments about making sure that improvements and alternatives proposed as part of this study, consider and tie into other plans for projects along the corridor, which, we did note this study does take into account all of those out here as well.
Great, thank you, Kathleen. Okay, well, I think that is, I think it's very helpful for the project team to have had the opportunity to talk in more detail about all of these alternatives. So I thank again everybody for their participation, and we'll definitely use what we heard to inform sort of the next steps moving forward and finalizing the alternatives and the draft recommendations. So that being said, I think we can transition to the next slide. Which is where we talk about next steps. And as we've sort of alluded to a couple times, we are in the final stages of the project. So over the course of the next couple months, we're going to be finalizing our recommendations ahead of a working group meeting, again, our working group meeting that's comprised of local and elected officials from municipalities, representatives from the state legislature. I know we've got a few state representatives and some state senators with us tonight, as well as some city councilors. We've got a public comment period that is going to be opening, we anticipate, in mid-April. That'll run for 30 days through mid-May before we finalize the report with everyone's feedback and incorporated, and that will, of course, all be posted on our website. So in terms of a schedule, as we said, we'll be working on the recommendations over the next couple months and then finalizing the report in the spring. You'll certainly receive notice of the public comment period once that opens, especially if you're signed up for our Gov Delivery email list, which you can access at our website. We have, both our mass.gov website and our sort of virtual room that's open 24/7. And here we go. So this is a place where we post, all sort of materials and documents related to the project. We also have a mapping survey where you can post comments and give feedback on specific locations throughout our study site. Also, this is an opportunity for you to access sort of post-meeting materials, including this recording. I think that sort of concludes our formal presentation. Again, thanks to everybody for participating in this meeting. We have until 8 p.m. and would love to hear from folks if they have questions and comments. I think Hung, are you going to review some of the details about how folks can sort of raise their hand and unmute?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I was looking for my mute button.
I know it's hard to, I'm having trouble finding it.
The share screen with Nikki is actually making it even harder, but we worked through it. So this is the question and answering comment session, and you can I've seen a few people have used our Q&A box to ask the question and provide some comments for us, so that's great. But if you'd like to verbally ask your questions or provide comments, you can raise your hand and then we can acknowledge you, and then you can unmute yourself. Please state your name and if your affiliation before your question so that we can have it on record and follow up with you afterwards. I see that right now there are a good number of people, 56 people. That's also including the project team. So we ask that you limit your questions to one question and about like 2 minutes, just so that everyone else can participate and provide some feedback as well. I don't see that anyone dialing in, but if I'm missing somebody from dialing in, you can press *9 there, and we'll call out the last 3 to 4 digits of your phone number, and then you can unmute yourself by pressing *6. Once again, we have made a survey so that you can provide some feedback with the Zoom meeting, the breakout room. So all the feedback would help us in the future greatly. So with that, we can open it up for public comments.
I believe there had been some questions that came in over the Q&A. Is that right?
Yeah. Okay. So the first one from Anonymous is, what role do the affected cities or communities have in this process as opposed to the Massachusetts State Departments?
I'm sorry, you cut out for me in the beginning of that. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. What role do the affected cities or communities have in this process as opposed to the Massachusetts State Departments?
Good question. Thank you. So, so we have representation from all of the municipalities in our study area on our study working group. And we've been very grateful to have sort of the support and the input of all of the municipalities. I also mentioned that we have several elected officials from the state legislature also serving on that working group. So we've been able to tap into a great degree of sort of municipal participation on the entire sort of study process.
Cool. I'm going to switch over to the raise hand. Josh Osthoff. I'm sorry, I mispronounced your name. You're from the Newton Planning.
Thank you so much. Appreciate all the work that's gone into this, and just joined the working group a few weeks ago. But I wanted to suggest that for folks who may not be familiar with the sequence of how things go from a idea in a study to a project that with a ribbon cutting, to clarify the agencies that might be involved in championing or moving a project forward. More for when a draft is published, if there's more clarity that these are ideas, some of them, as helpfully noted earlier, are ripe for immediate action, but others are more long-term. But I don't know that the public understands that in general. So some explanation of where this fits into a project cycle might be beneficial. And then, as I said before, who's involved.
I appreciate that comment, Josh, and I think it's a good one. It's a good idea, and we'll certainly try and explain how our study fits into the overall, as we sort of tried to talk about at the beginning of the meeting, but I think it deserves sort of a place on the report as well. So thank you for that comment.
Thank
And
you,
just
Liz.
to, sorry to interrupt, just to build on that, the recommendations will, and the implementation plan as part of the report will identify project champions, whether it's a municipality or a state agency, and really partner agencies as well, so that it's clear kind of who a recommended project champion would be for an individual action. We'll also be identifying the next steps to advance that action, whether we anticipate permitting being required, design, et cetera, public involvement. So all of those kind of logistical questions about how an alternative moves from a planning study towards implementation are something that we're hoping to lay the groundwork for very clearly in an implementation plan, so it's clear to the public how this alternatives could progress.
Super helpful, Nikki. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. I'll move over to the Q&A. Representative Kay Klan asked an old rail trail exists between Wellesley Lower Falls to Concord Street in Newton Lower Falls, but could continue to Riverside Station, which would then provide easy off-road access for many coming on bikes from Natick and Wellesley who are interested in getting to Riverside. Can this be considered?
I can chime in here. So thank you for that comment. And that's actually one of the alternatives that we looked at. And we talked about that in our group quite a bit. Alternative AT5 was looking at constructing the Lower Falls shared use path. So we know there's been some studies and some work on this in the past, including a DCR planning study that was completed in 2020. So our recommendation is kind of to take the results of that planning study and kind of progress that forward and helping build that connection, which for those aren't familiar would connect the existing little path that goes from Wellesley and crosses the Charles River by Concord Street, and then continuing that through Lower Falls, crossing the interstate Route 128, and then connecting into Riverside to the T-stop, and then long-term into some pedestrian and bicycle paths that continue north up the Charles River towards Auburndale. So thank you for that comment, and something we're already looking at.
Great. And I'm going to move over to the raise hand. Susan Barrett, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. So yeah, thank you for all of this. I'm especially excited about, the talk on additional transportation options. I mean, really all of this. But in regards to some of the transit suggestions, just wanted to make you aware there's sort of this other thing that's been percolating, which, many of us that run transportation services in the area have been trying to work on regionalizing and better coordinating those services. And that's something that's come up for ages and is easier said than done. But recently there's been a push to see if through the Boston MPO, Regional Transportation Advisory Council and others, can we really make a concerted effort to regionalize the services, make them more coordinated, make it easier for people to transfer from one to the other. And so as we think about whatever services might come here, whether they're MBTA, TMA, a municipality, just keeping that in mind, like not just adding another service, but really thinking about how is it ultimately part of a truly connected network that the public can understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I'm actually going to ask Michael from our study team if he's able to kind of answer your question on connecting and transit options across different providers, because that is something we've talked about quite a bit as a project team.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a fantastic comment, Susan. I jotted all of what you just said down. We've talked a lot on our team about the potential for transfers from one to another, and it's pretty clear that there's a variety of policy and fare barriers that make it a little bit of a challenge, but that certainly is not an excuse, and it's definitely something that other regions have been working on and working toward. Particularly like the Seattle region, I know they've done an enormous amount on fare integration to really coordinate their systems. So I've noted your comment, and you and I both know the complexities of all of this, but it's something that I think is really aspirational and something that could make getting around the region, not just the study area corridor, but the region as a whole, a lot easier and more convenient for members of the public.
Thank you, and thank you for your question, and thank you everyone for sharing your comments and questions and feedback with us tonight, and for taking the time this evening to join us. We appreciate your input here. And again, as my colleague Hung mentioned a little bit earlier, please continue to use the Q&A to type any comments or questions that you might have. Please also use the reactions button, to use your virtual raise hand button to share a comment or question verbally. And this is certainly not the only opportunity to share comments or questions as part of this process. Please visit the study website to access the comment form or additional information on the process. And so if there are any elected officials, members of their call, or members of their staff, or members of the public who have any comments or questions at this time, please feel free to share your comments or questions if you have any at this particular time. Looks like there's one Q&A, a comment rather about the diagrams, and a participant wanting to take a closer look at those. Liz, can you speak to where folks can access the materials to take a closer look at some of the diagrams after this meeting?
Yes, these materials will be posted both on our mass.gov website as well as our interactive study page. Both of those were on the slides that Nikki showed a bit earlier. I'll send out a meeting via the Gov delivery system following this meeting. So if you're not signed up for those updates, please sign up for those today or tomorrow. And when that email goes out, you'll definitely be able to access the link that gives you that will bring you to where those documents and materials are stored.
Great, thank you. I don't see any new comments or questions in the Q&A or raised hands at this time, but please continue to use the Q&A if you have any written comments or questions, or use the raise hand button to share any comments or questions that you might have verbally. I know the breakout rooms had a lot of robust discussion in them, but if there are any, comments or questions that people maybe didn't get a chance to share during the breakout rooms but would like to share now, please raise your hand or use the Q&A to do so. I see a raised hand from Josh.
Hey, Michaela. So I will be organizing with other Newton planning and development staff and our public works team, sort of a consolidated comment letter when we get to the public comment period. That might be something for the other four communities that are part of the working group to consider as well. It just provides a way to share within the different disciplines within our planning group, perspectives that I would, as one person new on staff, have the history or background for. And that's not meant to stand in for what every individual in Newton might say, but just the within city government consensus view on various projects. As I mentioned to Liz and Nikki before, I think, but look forward to wrangling all that input, and I'm glad that we don't have to do it like this week. It feels like we've got maybe a month or so before then. But a question to on top of that is, I think I understood that it was a March-April comment period. Am I right?
It will be April to May. April to May is what we're planning right now.
Great.
So
Excellent.
yes.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Liz.
And thank you for always, we're especially grateful to all of the folks that have been able to share information with others in their networks about this project and about opportunities to comment and give feedback on this project. So, we're always available in case people have questions or feel free to email me if there's things that I can share directly with individuals or organizations. You know, we've been really grateful to have the level of feedback and support from all of the stakeholders about around this project. And so, you know, the more feedback, the better.
You say that now.
Thank you. I don't see any new comments or questions in the Q&A at this time, but again, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to type in any comments or questions that you might have. Also, if you'd like to share a comment or question verbally, please click reactions at the bottom of your screen and click the raise hand button. And if you're joining us by phone this evening, please dial *9 to raise your virtual hand.
Well, I mean, I certainly don't mean to keep people, you know, with us longer than they'd like to be. If folks don't have questions or comments, maybe Michaela, we can give it, I don't know, time, you know, as long as 30 more seconds or something, in case folks have something they'd like to say, they can raise their hand. But I just want to remind everybody again, there's several more opportunities for folks to comment between sending us an email or sharing comments on the public, I'm sorry, on the draft report that we'll be posting for the public comment period in April. You know, we're always happy to share information and resources and hear from the public. So I think all of that being said, just sort of making the same point over and over again, stalling to see if people raise their hands or ask a question. But I think on that note, maybe we can just sort of wrap things up and end it. So Nikki, what do you think?
Sounds good. Thank you all for your feedback today. It's been really helpful.
Great. So look out for an email from us. Oh, James, we have a hand raised.
Hi. Sorry to jump in at the last minute. I guess I was wondering what could be done to engage with like local municipalities and stuff to make sure like development actually happens and like in line with this stuff, because like I see like on the in this corridor, like where it's the development on Main Street, where they're going to be adding that interchange, that's just going to make Main Street more of a highway through the rest of the city. And like that seems like something where like it needs to have like lane reduction or something there just to reduce the amount of traffic that's going to be induced by adding that. But like I don't think that there's a clear path for that to happen. So I mean, I guess in line with like the rest of the stuff about making this more safe for pedestrians and that type of stuff, like that seems like something that would have to happen, but I don't see how that happens given how things are currently organized.
Understandable. I see Nikki writing down your comment. And we, you know, I'd say we have our, in terms of sort of keeping engaged with municipalities, you know, with respect to this study, we've posted the who from each municipality is participating in our working group and other elected officials. So I would certainly sort of, you know, our study anticipates having different recommendations that are tied to different stakeholders. So I would sort of recommend, you know, maybe following up via that way, and again, reaching out to those members in your municipality that are, you know, have jurisdiction over some of those local improvements. But again, always happy to sort of take questions and comments, especially during that public comment period on some of the specific alternatives. Well, thank you again for joining us. The project website is posted on the screen, as is my email address. It was great to hear from all of you tonight, and as usual, the recording will be posted on the website, and you will get an email with relevant links following the meeting. So thanks everybody again for participating, and we'll catch up soon. Thanks, bye.